Hello my dear children, welcome to Learner's Planet. Children, in the previous session of Force, Work and Energy, we discussed about one simple machine called lever, and we discussed about class 1 levers, class 2 levers and class 3 levers. And today's session we are going to continue this lesson and we will study about more simple machines. So let us start with this session and learn about simple machines. Yes. So the first simple machine which we are going to discuss here in today's session is pulley. As you know children that a pulley is a wheel with a groove along its edge for holding a rope or a chain. As you can see here in the picture, this is a wheel with a grooved rim. This is the rope, and to the wheel there is a stationary axle attached. So that stationary axle means that there is a rod type structure over here which is called as axle. It is stationary, it doesn't move. On that wheel is attached, that too with a grooved rim, and rope passes through this grooved rim, and a person is able to lift up a heavier object. That is why we define it as a wheel with a groove along its edge for holding a rope or a chain. So as you can see here in this image, you can say that the rope or a chain is moving. It is not stationary. What is stationary over here? It is an axle and a wheel. So we can say that a pulley is really a kind of wheel, just as a screw is a kind of an inclined plane. But pulley is a wheel with two raised edges so that a rope or a string or a chain will run along the wheel without coming off. So what it is called as? It is often called as a block and a tackle. Why it is called as a block and tackle? Yes, because it is a wheel with a groove which holds a rope or a chain, right? So in ancient times, there were no wheels in nature, and so there were also no pulleys. So some scientists or some of the people believe that pulleys may have been invented by Archimedes in about 250 BC. BC means before Christ. So as with a screw, we can use a pulley in several different ways. And we can use a pulley to make it easier to pull a rope, to change the direction of a force, or to get more mechanical advantage, and we can lift something heavier than we can lift by ourselves. And that is why these simple machines are used. As you know very well, what is meant by simple machine? We discussed about it in the previous class. Yes, a machine can be defined as a tool that makes our work easier by helping us overcome a larger force that is called as load by applying lesser force called as effort. So machines are of two types. They may be simple and they may be complex. So these simple machines which we are discussing, they are all simple machines. In the machines which we are discussing are simple machines. We are not going to discuss any complex machine. Right, so pulley is a kind of wheel with a groove, and lever is a type of simple machine, right? Even we can say that there are other simple machines like lever, which are already classified or divided into three classes. Then there is wheel and axle, there is pulley, inclined plane, screw and wedge. In today's session we are going to discuss about pulley and inclined plane. Rest of them we will discuss in the next session. Okay, so let us continue with this pulley. Yes, pulleys are further usually used in sets which are designed to reduce the amount of force needed to lift a load, right? So you can see in the picture that there is a wheel. So we can say that the wheel rotates around the stationary axle, and a pulley makes it easier to lift a bucket of water from a well Now what can you see over here? Yes. Where are we applying the force? We are basically applying force over here, right? And this is the load, the bucket of water which is coming up and going down. This is the load, and we are applying force over here. But we are able to make our work easier with the help of pulley, because it reduces the amount of force which we are applying on it, and that is why it is needed to lift a load. So we can say that a pulley makes it easier to lift a bucket of water from a well. It is also used for other purposes, like there is a small pulley at the top of the flagpole which helps in raising the flag. So next time when you are hoisting the flag in your compound, in your society, or anyone else is hoisting the flag, just have a look at it. That a small pulley is present at the top of a flagpole which helps in raising the flag, right? So usually machines use a combination of two types of pulleys. Basically there are three types of pulleys. One is a fixed pulley, another one is a movable pulley, and third one is the combination of fixed and movable pulleys. So let us study about it. Yes, as you can see here, this is a fixed pulley and this is a movable pulley. Now what happens that with a fixed pulley, the pulley is attached to a hook or a wall and it doesn't move. For example, the clothesline pulley. A fixed pulley doesn't give us that much of mechanical advantage in comparison to movable pulley, but it changes the direction of the force. That means if we are applying force on something, pulley will reduce the amount of force which we are applying and it will make it easier to lift anything. That means pulleys are very advantageous for us. So basically we can say that a fixed pulley can give us mechanical advantage but not that much, but it changes the direction of force. For instance, we can pull down any object in order to lift that object up, or we can pull the upper clothesline towards us in order to move the lower clothesline away from us. So next time when you observe, or next time you can see or you can notice that whenever we hang clothes on a clothesline, and if you have that type of clothesline at your home, you can see that if you will pull the upper clothesline towards you in order to move the lower clothesline away from you, you will see that there is one pulley attached to it. There is a fixed pulley and there is a movable pulley, right? So basically what we can say, that what is the main difference between a fixed pulley and a movable pulley? Yes, a fixed pulley has a fixed axle and a movable pulley has a free axle. As you can see here in this picture, some of the difference you can notice over here, right? This is the fixed one and this is movable one. Means we can move it. Here it is fixed. It cannot move that much like a movable pulley. Now what other things are there? Yes, with a movable pulley we can have a mechanical advantage. Like we can pull any object with less force for a longer distance to get the same work done. That means the same work can be carried out by fixed pulley also and by movable pulley also. But in comparison to the movable pulley which we are using, it will have more mechanical advantage than using fixed pulley. That means we can pull any object with both the pulleys or either of the pulleys with less force for a longer distance to get the same work done. Means the movable pulley lets us lift things that would be too heavy for us, right? So always remember that a pulley is a wheel with a groove along its edge for holding a rope or a chain or a string or a cable. So pulleys are basically used in a combination. to reduce the amount of force which is needed to lift a load. Right? So however, the amount of work is necessary for the load to reach the same height as it would without the pulleys. So the magnitude of the force is reduced, but it must act to a longer distance. So pulleys are usually considered one of the simple machines. So a fixed pulley has a fixed axle and it is used to redirect the force in a rope, which is called the belt when it goes in the full circle. So a fixed pulley has a mechanical advantage of 1, while a movable pulley has a free axle which is used to transform the forces, not redirecting the forces as in fixed pulley. So it transforms the forces. When stationary, the total force of the axle balances the total force which is provided by the tension in the rope. So if one end of a rope is attached to a fixed object pulling on the other end, that means the other end will apply a doubled force to any object which is attached to an axle. So a movable pulley has a mechanical advantage of 2. That means movable pulley has more advantage than fixed pulley, right? Alright, so this was about 2 types of pulleys. As we also discussed that there are mainly 3 types of pulleys. So the third one is the combined pulley or compound pulley. Now what does this mean? Yes, there are some machines which use a combination of fixed and movable pulleys both. So we can say that this is a combined pulley. A combined pulley or a compound pulley is a system of fixed and movable pulleys or just movable pulleys. So the mechanical advantage can be increased by using this type of block and tackle, where there are several pulleys on each axle, as you can see here, right? So it is a combination of 2 pulleys, right? So some of the scientists reported that Archimedes moved an entire warship laden with men using compound or combined pulleys and his own strength. So how amazing it was. At that time only people knew about the pulleys, right? For example, a simple pulley which is used to lift a bucket of water from the well. So a girl is using a simple type of pulley. In the second picture you can see here, this is a flagpole pulley. As we discussed that it helps in raising the flag. The other examples are the rock climber pulley. It helps a person to climb the rock. So by using this we can climb the rock, right? So this is called a rock climber pulley, in which this type of material or this type of object is used. Here the rope is passed through this rock climber pulley, right? Even here in this picture you can see a combination of several pulleys, right? So this is a compound pulley or a combined pulley, right? And what is it called as? Yes, it is called a marine pulley. So we saw many examples of pulleys. Now we are going to study about inclined plane, right? So children, what is an inclined plane? Yes, an inclined plane is any slope or a ramp. It makes it easier to lift a heavy object, right? So basically what we can say that an inclined plane is a sloping surface. So it is very easy to push or roll an object up an inclined plane than to lift it directly. So basically an inclined plane is any slope or a ramp like a wheelchair ramp or a slide. So instead of lifting the rock straight up, we can push it at a greater distance but with a less force. As you can see here, if we want to load any object, so we can place it here, we will apply force over here. That means this will be effort, this is the load, and the force is applied upwards, effort is applied upwards, right? So remember this, that instead of lifting the rock straight up, we can push it at a greater distance with a less force. So the amount of work remains the same. Now try to recall that the amount of work remains the same means what is work? Yes, work is equals to force into distance, or force multiplied by distance. So if we increase the distance, the object or the rock moves, and we can decrease the amount of force we need. So always remember this, that work is equals to force into distance. That means if we will increase the distance, the object will move and we can decrease the amount of force we need. And if we are applying more force, the amount of force is more, and if we are increasing the amount of force, that means we are decreasing the distance, right? So if the distance is smaller, we will have to apply more force on that object so that the object can move. So it will not make it easier for us. So always remember that we should increase the distance so that the amount of force we are applying will be less. So remember one more thing, children, that if we make the ramp steeper, so we will have a shorter distance. Steeper means if the height is more, that means we will have a shorter distance, and if we are trying to pull any object over here, that means it will be harder to push the object upwards because we will need more force. And in comparison to this, if the height is smaller and if we will make the ramp less steep, that means it will have to be longer. This plane will have to be a longer one, but it will be easier to push any object upwards. So either way, it's the same amount of work in the end. The work will be done. The work will be same in this and this too. But what is the difference? It is our choice of doing easier work for a longer time by making the ramp less steep, or we have to make it harder for us while choosing or while doing this or making the ramp steeper. So it is our choice of doing easier work for a longer time or a harder work for a shorter time. Always remember that the work done will be same amount of work will be there in the end. It is upon us to make the ramp steeper, more steeper or less steep, right? Always remember that if we will make the ramp steeper, there will be harder work for us for a shorter time, and if we will make the ramp less steep, then it will be an easier work for us, but it will take a longer time. But the amount of work will be the same at the end, right? So here in this image, what you can see in this picture, this is an example of one such inclined plane where the people are trying to climb, or we can rather say that people are trying to walk on this inclined plane. So we call it an inclined plane because it is a plane, a flat surface, and it is inclined, which is sloped but not leveled. In ancient times, all kinds of animals use inclined planes when they choose their path up to a steep hill, and people have used them since they were people, for about 200,000 years ago. And by the time of Old Kingdom Egypt, that is about 2500 BC, that is before Christ, people were building their own earth ramps to move heavy stones for the pyramids. And even the first staircases were a kind of inclined plane, because stairs make it easier to go up right? So it was also a kind of inclined plane, and the first staircases were built by those people in the old kingdom Egypt about 2500 BC, right? So basically what we can say, now the inclined plane is a plane surface which is set at an angle other than the right angle, that too against a horizontal surface. So always remember that this is an inclined plane. Sorry, this is not the perfect one. I'll make a perfect one for you, then I'll show you, right? So this one is an inclined plane. Just remember that a person applies force, or we can say it is an effort, and it applies force upwards, or it can apply force downwards also, right? So this is a force, and this is a plane surface. Upon it there is an inclined plane. That means it is sloped. This one is sloped, not leveled, right? So the inclined plane is a plane surface which is set at an angle other than a right angle. This one is a right angle. So inclined plane is a plane which is set at an angle other than the right angle. That means here it will make an angle against a horizontal surface. This is a horizontal surface, right? So the inclined plane permits one to overcome a large resistance by applying small force through a longer distance than the load is to be raised. So it is easier to push or roll an object up an inclined plane than to lift it directly. For example, a sloping plank which is used while loading barrels into a truck or any other heavier object into the truck or the bus, right? So this is an example of inclined plane, right? These staircases are example of an inclined plane. Here you can see that a person is trying hard to push this heavier object into the truck. This is an example of a car parking ramps, right? And here there is a person. Here also in skiing is a type of sport in which inclined plane is used, right? So there are such examples like ramps, sloping roads, slams, sloping roads, then parking ramp. Even there are other examples too, like escalator. You can see here that this is also type of an inclined plane. Then roller coaster. See how these children are riding on this roller coaster and they are so happy. Then here you can see that some tanks or barrels have been loaded into the truck. So roller coaster, bathtub, boat propeller, parking ramp, car ramps, ladders, stairs, dumper, all these are an example of inclined plane, right? So in today's session we discussed about pulley and inclined plane. I hope you enjoyed today's session and learned about it, right? So in the next session we will be learning about more simple machines. Till then, keep learning, keep enjoying. Thank you, children.